The last thing my father said before slamming the front door was, "You'll be begging on the street by 30. I still remember the sound of his laughter following me down the driveway like broken glass scraping concrete. I was 19, carrying 2 trash bags stuffed with clothes, a burned-out laptop, and exactly $43 inside my coat pocket. My mother stood behind the kitchen window watching me leave without blinking once. My name is Vanessa Holloway, and that night changed the chemistry of my entire life. The cold air smelled like rain and gasoline while I sat outside the Greyhound station pretending not to cry. I kept replaying the argument inside my head. Dad called me selfish for refusing to abandon culinary school and work at his hardware store forever. Mom said dreams were luxuries for rich people. Then Dad grabbed my suitcase and threw it onto the lawn like I was already garbage. I slept upright on a plastic bench until sunrise, listening to strangers cough beside me. Around 5 in the morning, my phone buzzed unexpectedly. It was a voicemail from my mother, but she wasn't crying. She was laughing too. I listened to the voicemail 3 times before deleting it forever. My mother sounded breathless from laughing while telling somebody in the background, "She'll come crawling back within 6 months." Then the recording ended with glasses clinking together like they were celebrating my funeral. That morning, I walked 2 miles through freezing drizzle to a diner near the station because their sign said dishwasher needed immediately. The owner barely looked at my application before handing me an apron stained with old grease. My hands blistered within hours. By midnight, my fingertips felt peeled raw from detergent and boiling water, but I stayed after closing scrubbing floors because exhaustion hurt less than humiliation. I rented half of a storage room behind a laundromat from another waitress, named Carla. There was no window, no shower, just a folding cot beside towers of detergent boxes. Every night, I studied culinary textbooks under a flickering bulb while rats scratched inside the walls. Months passed without hearing from my parents again. Then one Friday evening, a black pickup truck pulled beside the diner while I carried trash outside. My father stepped out wearing the same cruel smile I grew up fearing. He looked me over slowly before dropping something heavy onto the wet pavement beside my feet. The heavy object hit the pavement with a metallic crack. It was my old knife set from culinary school, tossed into the rain like scrap metal. One handle had snapped completely off. Dad kept smiling while water soaked through his expensive coat. "Thought you'd want these back before the pawn shops reject them too," he said loudly enough for the kitchen staff behind me to hear. I bent down carefully, gathering each knife, without speaking. My hands shook from rage more than cold. "You know what your problem is, Vanessa," he continued. "You confuse pride with talent." The dumpsters behind the diner smelled rotten after the storm. Grease floated through puddles around my shoes, while passing headlights flashed across his face. For a second, I saw exactly who he was beneath the polished church suits and fake neighborhood charm, a man terrified somebody else might become bigger than him. "I'm working," I said quietly. "Please leave." He laughed again. Same laugh. Same poison. Then he leaned closer. "Your mother cried from embarrassment when relatives asked where you disappeared to." That sentence cut deeper than anything else. Not because it hurt, because I finally understood something devastating. They never missed me. I carried the broken knives inside and worked until 4 in the morning without stopping once. At sunrise, Carla found me unconscious beside the stove, still gripping one blade tightly. I woke inside the emergency room with M4 taped to my arm and dried blood beneath my fingernails. Carla sat beside the bed eating vending machine crackers while glaring at me like an angry sister. "You worked 31 hours straight," she said. "That isn't ambition. That's self-destruction." The doctor warned me about dehydration and exhaustion, but all I could think about was the humiliation on my father's face if he saw me there. Weak. Collapsed. Exactly what he expected. 2 days later, the diner owner fired me for causing problems during business hours. I thanked him anyway because desperate people learn quickly how to swallow pride without choking. I found another kitchen job downtown prepping vegetables for banquets at a hotel nobody famous actually visited anymore. The pay was terrible, but the executive chef, Lionel Mercer, noticed details other people ignored. He watched how I diced onions evenly under pressure. how I balanced seasoning instinctively, without measuring. One night after service, he tasted a tomato soup I made from leftover ingredients and stared at me silently for almost 10 seconds. "Who trained you?" he finally asked. "No one," I answered honestly. Something shifted behind his eyes after that. 3 weeks later, Lionel handed me keys to the kitchen before sunrise and said, "Don't embarrass me tonight." Then I discovered the banquet booking was for 800 guests, and Lionel never showed up. The kitchen froze the moment staff realized Lionel was missing. 800 guests were arriving within hours for a mayoral fundraising gala, and every cook inside that hotel looked ready to quit. Orders overlapped across counters while burners smoked unattended. Somebody dropped an entire tray of salmon onto the floor. Then every terrified face turned toward me because Lionel had left the kitchen keys in my hands. I should have panicked. Instead, something inside me became frighteningly calm. I started assigning stations before anyone could argue. I rewrote half the menu using ingredients already prepped, cut unnecessary garnish work, and reorganized the timing board with a black marker shaking slightly between my fingers. The air smelled like garlic, wine, and adrenaline while servers sprinted through swinging doors carrying stacks of plates. For 6 straight hours, I barely breathed. When the final entree left the pass, silence spread slowly across the kitchen. One dishwasher actually started clapping first. Then another cook joined him. I remember standing there sweaty and exhausted while strangers looked at me differently than anyone ever had before. Not with pity. Not with disappointment. With respect. Near midnight, the hotel general manager walked into the kitchen holding a business card between 2 fingers. "The owner of Bellamy Restaurants wants to meet whoever saved tonight," he said. I took the card carefully. Then my stomach dropped after reading the name printed underneath the gold logo. Gregory Holloway. My uncle. I had not seen Uncle Gregory since my grandmother's funeral, years before my parents threw me out. Back then, Dad called him a traitor because he sold his share of the family hardware business and opened restaurants instead. According to my father, Gregory embarrassed the family by serving overpriced pasta to rich idiots. Now his name sat inside my trembling hands. The meeting happened inside a quiet steakhouse overlooking the river. Gregory studied me across the table for several long moments before speaking. He had my father's eyes, but none of his cruelty. "You look exactly like your grandmother when she was angry," he said softly. I laughed despite myself. Then I told him everything. The storage room, the diner, the voicemail, the knives thrown beside the dumpsters. He listened without interrupting once. When I finally stopped talking, shame burned through me for exposing so much weakness aloud. Instead of pity, Gregory slid a folder across the table. Inside were partnership papers for a failing restaurant downtown he wanted to renovate. "You don't need charity," he said. "You need ownership." I stared at him speechless, while traffic lights reflected across the windows behind us. Nobody had ever offered me trust before. Then Gregory reached into his coat pocket and placed something else carefully onto the table. It was my mother's wedding ring. And suddenly, nothing inside my family made sense anymore. The ring looked smaller than I remembered. Thin gold band. Tiny diamond chip near the center. My mother used to twist it constantly whenever she lied. "Why do you have this?" I asked quietly. Gregory exhaled heavily before answering. "Because your mother sold it to me 11 years ago." The restaurant noise around us disappeared completely. "She came to my office crying," he continued. "Your father had gambling debts nobody knew about. Creditors were threatening lawsuits. I offered help, but his pride wouldn't allow it." Gregory paused carefully. "Then he blamed you for the financial pressure after culinary school tuition bills arrived." I felt physically sick hearing the truth rearrange my entire past. "They didn't throw me out because I failed them," I whispered. "No," Gregory said gently. "They threw you out because they were drowning." For several seconds, anger battled heartbreak inside my chest so violently I could barely breathe. Every cruel sentence, every insult, every laugh suddenly carried desperation underneath it. That realization hurt worse than hatred ever could. Gregory gave me 24 hours before signing the partnership papers. I spent that entire night walking city streets alone, thinking about the version of myself who slept inside storage rooms believing she deserved abandonment. At sunrise, my phone rang unexpectedly. Caller ID showed my mother's name for the first time in 15 years. I answered immediately. I answered without speaking. For several seconds, all I heard was breathing. Then my mother said softly, "Your father's sick." No apology. No regret. Just strategy. She explained everything carefully after that. The debt collectors. The second mortgage. The hardware store collapsing during the recession. Dad's recent stroke leaving half his body weak. Her voice sounded exhausted now, stripped of the arrogance I remembered from childhood. Then she finally reached the real reason for calling. "We heard about your restaurants," she said quietly. "Your father believes family deserves another chance." I stared through my apartment windows toward downtown, where 14 restaurant signs glowed across the city, like surviving scars. Every kitchen represented nights nobody rescued me. Every paycheck carried memories of hunger, humiliation, and silence. "What exactly are you asking for?" I asked. A long pause followed. 30% ownership, she whispered. "We sacrificed years raising you." I almost laughed hearing the calculation underneath her trembling voice. Instead, I walked toward my desk and opened a sealed envelope already waiting there. Gregory helped prepare it weeks earlier after warning me this call would eventually come. "You should check your mailbox tomorrow morning," I told her calmly. Inside that envelope were copies of every debt my father secretly created under my name before throwing me out. And my lawsuit,